There you go. We're live. Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
everybody. The scene of the crime. My latest novel. And you want to say, why did you write it? How did you write it? And I always have to have a reason. I mean, even if you have a character that is picked up in every book that you write, I always have to have a reason that I want to write that novel. And I do this podcast, which is called Listening to the Dead. And I have been absolutely honored to have so many forensic scientists from every single department that you could think of working with me on this pod. And, to actually have a lengthy discussion with a blood specialist, to have a lengthy, unbelievable forensic interview with somebody as honourable as Pamela Wiltshire, a botanist. And I kept on gathering more and more material of how brilliant and how forward forensic science has grown. I mean, at a pace. I mean, we are now uncovering killers from a 40-year-old murder. That's how, that is hardly believable. So then I thought, what would happen if you had a team? They were a group. When they come across brutal murder, you call the team in. So you don't have that situation where your body is found murdered and you have to wait for a blood specialist, wait for somebody that can actually look at a footprint and tell you more details about the possible assailant that you could believe. And so that was the culmination of why I began to think about the scene of the crime. I wanted that group to come in fast for us to see. They're not police, they're CSI. They don't make arrests. They virtually give the clues. Because more so now, after a crime has been committed, and obviously a murder, you want to keep the police back. You're shedding on material, you're contaminating. So that was the premise. And then creating the character of Jessica Russell. And that is a joy, because I could piece together so many of the wonderful scientists I met. And one in particular had a laugh. She was so deadly serious. And then she would suddenly say something and laugh. That laugh, I thought, I'm going to use that. So I know it's been a bit dithering along to give you all the details, but that's the premise. It's so good.
You've just been asked to remind someone what the name of your podcast is.
Listening to the Dead.
I wondered when I was reading it how much like your kind of background in screenwriting and things influences your writing to date, because I felt like the first part of the book was almost like the setup to a TV show. Like you were learning about the characters before they got started. It was really nice, but quite unusual.
Yeah. I don't allow that to really begin any thoughts in my brain. If I am drawing you in to a character, because I want you to like them and I want you to go along with them rather than just drop a character in and then a few pages later you say, oh, they've got incredibly short cropped hair. I love you to actually see the character I'm writing. And with Jessica, I very purposefully gave her very strong looks. Not pretty. She's not a young 20-year-old. She's in her 30s and she's got a lot of experience. What would be very nice would obviously be somebody going, this has got to be a television series, yes. And that would be lovely. I hope so.
So is that not a thing you think about when you're writing a new series? You don't think, oh,
No,
this could be. You're not thinking
no,
about writing it with TV in mind.
no. By the time I'm writing, I've probably spent months researching. There is no possibility of me to just sit down and, out it would all come. How long does somebody in a coma last when you think they're going to die? And in this novel, the victim is so brutally beaten, a knife stuck in his back, and he's in a coma. He's going to die. So they have to get to the evidence. You can't suddenly ask him a question because he's not going to be able to answer you. So that to me is a very interesting part for me to then go talk to specialists, ask them about a coma and how they behave after a coma. Because, I mean, I don't want to give away too much of the plot, so to speak. That's the way I work. Now, if a doctor says to me, if he comes round, he will probably be incoherent, then I have to know to incorporate that in the book. And I follow all the research over and over again. And then when I'm talking to the man who was a scientist, his fascination with footwear, he's the man they go to if they say, look, we've got this footprint. What can you tell us about it? And it's quite extraordinary. From half or three quarters of a footprint in soil, after they've done all the obligatory, tests and the plaster of carrot, whatever it is, he can tell you, well, one, you're looking for an Adidas, you're a size 10.5. But also what's interesting about the shoe is the way the right side of the foot has worn down one part of this shoe. So that means this man is slightly lopsided. So if you get a suspect in and he limps a bit, you go, ha ha, ha ha. This is how clever these forensic scientists are. They can tell you really almost immediately how tall your blood splatter has come from the knife, the length and the width above the head, the splattering, and are they right-handed or left-handed? And it really does move an inquiry on. But all they're basically doing is clues. Here are the clues, pick them up. And the vigilance of people like Jessica is she's monitoring everything. She doesn't miss a trick. We're very used to seeing in every detective series them dusting for fingerprints. And they're always dusting the most obvious places, handles, doors. No, not her. She'll go under the desk, where a safe has been broken open. You have a locksmith expert to say, this was an experienced housebreaker because of the way the lock has been broken. And all that combined into me research. Then I love to rock and roll. So if ever I begin writing and start to think, could this be a movie? I think I've lost the track. I don't think about that. And, with other novels I've written, it's been very heartbreaking sometimes when in my Jack War series, I used two characters from Widows. I used Harry Rawlins' name because he's deceased way before this, Jack War featured, and his wife, Dolly Rawlins. And everyone, it's called Buried, the first book of Jack War Detective. And he was a very carefully constructed character because I wanted you to like him, trust him. He's not an exceptional detective at all. He's very intuitive. And he's very, very likable. And his discovery of his past was very, very important to me. But I don't own Harry Rawlins, and I don't own Dolly Rawlins. They are owned by, I think it's Fox Movies bought the rights. So all the people that wanted to do a TV series, I couldn't do it. I couldn't say, no, don't own the characters. And that is, a bit very hard lesson to take on board. You own nothing. And this is when my biggest note to every single writer and all of you out there, if you're there listening.
Oh no, there's lots of people there listening.
Get a lawyer. Never sign a contract without a lawyer saying, this is what you own, this is what they own. Don't sign it until you get that corrected. You own nothing. And so one forgets that, being, the first widows, it was so exciting. I didn't know what I was signing. I had a totally inept agent. Prime suspect. Wouldn't you have thought by then I maybe have learned a lesson? No, I didn't know. I thought Widows was wonderfully successful. It was terrific and exciting. And then Prime Suspect. Guess what? Don't own it. They can do what they like with it. Don't own it. I was just a commissioned writer, which is why I didn't write all the series of Prime Suspect, because I reached a point when I said, no, I don't want my character to do that. Well, we'll get another writer. That's a slap in the face, Not that they weren't good. I hasten to add, they were. But that's a point. It's writing for TV. Anybody out there writing, entering a script thing, entering a session, make sure you have a lawyer, in preference to an agent. Lawyers, let them look over what you're signing. Do not sign anything until they've said you own it.
That's very valuable advice. We asked people in the group to come up with questions before this, and one of the questions that they asked was, did you ever think that Dolly Rawlins would be as iconic as she is?
No, I never thought it. But I never thought I could write it anyway. I was an actor and a working actor, and I worked consecutively at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I was permanently in work, and I did a lot of repertory, a lot of stage work, as well as a lot of TV. But, television, you could go up for a TV part, and they would say, so what have you been doing? I said, well, I've just played Desdemona. And, oh, no, we don't go to the theatre. And usually I was only ever cast as a prostitute. In every TV crime show that you've ever seen, I'm a prostitute. I have more lines, hello, love, where are you going, than any other actor you could ever be. And it was so frustrating because I could go and do Ibsen in the theatre, and then I'd go up for a part. I existed on going up for TV adverts. That's how I survived. But you reach a point of such tedium. Every part was the same. Hello, love, you're coming my way. Because I was red-haired and came from Liverpool and short. That was it. And I don't know how Widows, the main creation of it, was so successful, because it was one of the most exciting times of my life. And I'd written just 2 pages. And this is another thing to writers. I want to take writers and say, learn how to do a treatment. What is a treatment? A treatment should only be at the very most 2 pages, 2.5, and you're pushing it. You don't need to name all your characters. And the idea for Widows came from something in the newspaper. And another important thing to writers is if you've got an idea and you think it's a winner and you think it could make a series or a one-off movie, send it to the right people. If you've got a drama, be very careful you're not sending it to the comedy department in any of all the TV places we've got. And it's very easy. How do I find out who is head of drama at the BBC? You pick up the phone and you ask. They'll tell you at reception who's the head of drama. Commissioning, ITV, all of it. It's very simple. If you've got the bottle to do it, just put on a funny voice. Hello, I'm writing something and I like, whatever. And so I wrote 2 pages. Another note to everybody is you do not have to put every single character that's in your whole idea. You hit it like a newspaper hitting, a newspaper headline, grab it, push it. That's what they're going to grab for and want to read. So widows, and I can remember most of it, it was literally a big time criminal fails in a heist and his people are burnt to death. His widows, one particular widow of the lead gangster, is more than bereft. She is absolutely grief-stricken, wants to make her husband still live. And she finds the raid details at their home. It's a lunatic. But, when you go in to pitch it, Verity Lambert, who was the most extraordinary, wonderful producer, said, yeah, but you've never written anything, Lynda. And I said, I know. So she said, look, I'll tell you what, we'll commission episode 1. Now, if it's no good, do you mind if we bring in another writer? And I said, no, to be honest, I didn't really understand what the word commission meant. But then she said, all right, how long do you need to write episode 1? I don't know. Well, I didn't know gangsters. I didn't know police. I didn't know these criminals like Dolly Rawlins, these tough, hard women married to big-time criminals. I didn't know them. So I said, oh, maybe a few months. She said, oh, that's good. That's quick. Yes, all right. So off I went. And then it began. And that's how I've worked ever since. Go to source. And I went to women in prison. I went to prisoners. I went to the police. I literally went to every single, and the characters began to move towards me. And one in particular, the Dolly Rawlins character. I used to work when I was out of unemployed in a market stall, Ladbroke Grove. I was selling rubbish. And there was a woman on the fruit and veg. And she was, yeah, come on, Dolly, come on, lovely tomatoes, feel it, oh, lovely potatoes, grab this, come on, Dolly. And another stallholder, I told I was writing this, I'm writing a script for TV. And she said, oh, what's it about? And I said, well, it's about criminals. And she said, oh, you should talk to her. Talk to that woman. Her husband's in for murder. So I went up to her and I said, excuse me, I wonder if you'd help me. I'm writing. I can't actually do the 4-letter word that she told me a number of times to off, which she did. She wasn't interested. Not 1 second was she interested. And then for one extraordinary moment, she came over to me and she said, do you want to have a meeting? And I met her and she was a different woman. She had beautifully coiffured hair, makeup, and she had a different voice. And that soft, come in. What do you want to know about me, darling? She was chilling, and it was so exciting. I thought, oh my God, I found her. And in all honesty, that's the way I've worked on every single novel, every single TV, Prime Suspect, you name it. That's the way I've worked. I've gone to source. And I suppose in many ways, as an actor, it's helped, because the darker you go and the more dangerous you go, I found very quickly no notebooks, no tape recorders, they'll retract. Just talk to them, honestly. And then underline the word respect. If people give me their time, I respect them. I do not abuse them. And in some cases, I've said, if you're worried about what I'm writing, do you want to see it? And I will show it. I don't mind if they go, it's rubbish. But that's the way I've worked in every. And so really, going back to the latest epic, it's exactly that. You know, the joy of sitting, talking to somebody with such expertise as Patricia Wilshire. Get her book, Traces, everybody. Brilliant. She's brilliant. I had to go off tangent a bit there. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's fine to go off tangent. I'm going to stay off tangent, and then I'm going to go back to Jessica, I promise.
Yeah.
But I read Whole Life Sentence as well, and I've got to ask this question in like preparation for the interview. There's a marshal in the book who's like an actor who they go to get the evidence from, and I wondered if that was a little nod to you.
No.
No?
No, not really. No. The funny thing is, though, you know, well, you can all tell I'm always laughing, you know, and I find everything quite funny. You know, and people ask me, what's your favorite program? What do you watch on TV? Well, one of my most favorite programs is, you know, Brits living in Spain. You know, bargain loving Brits. I sit there falling about laughing at these incredibly funny people. You know, lines, they throw out lines there. One, he runs a fish and chip shop, and he goes, well, you know, on the weekday when my fish and chips are a bit, you know, not so good, I get all my market gear for a Sunday market. I'd sell my grandmother if she was worth anything. And they come out with these lines, bang, bang. Very wonderfully joyful people. You know, Benny Joel, more Benny Joel. Because working with darkness and eking it out of you takes a lot of energy, a lot. And as I said earlier, you know, I begin work as soon as I've finished the research. And then it's like a race for me. Get it all out, get everything out. I've got more little sticky tapes and bits of paper littered all over the computer. They're sometimes stuck on me as I'm going, what was the name of the guy? What was that? Oh, yes, it did. Okay, got the name. And so it's that energy level is exhausting. You know, I'm laughing, I'm crying. And then I have to take a break. My break is bargain loving Brits in Benidorm. Oh, it's wonderful.
You have been asked what motivates you to still sit down and write another book on the stream.
If I what?
You have been asked on the stream what motivates you to sit down and still want to sit down and write another book.
Well, you know, if I was, you know, lying, I'd say I just had to wait. The truth is, I get commission. You know, that's how I earn my living. And that's the basic truth. If my publishers suddenly said, well, the sales haven't been very good. Sorry. Off. Well, I just probably sit there. I do something else. I paint, or I don't know. I don't know what I do. Um, but I'm asked, and my fans, I get incredible feedback from fans. I mean, just amazing. Um, but it's hard work because you've also got to do promotion. You have to promote, and some promotions, going up for breakfast TV. That's very hard. It's very hard because you have a researcher. You don't know who this researcher is, and they're usually on the phone. And they go, "Hello, Lynda. Would you mind if I just run through a few things in your life, about the book?" So you spend an inordinate time with these researchers who you don't know, never meet. Then you get to your breakfast, and it's usually, at the crack of dawn. You've been on the train, you're off the train, you're off the hotel, and you're running to get into your 5-minute slot on the couch with, the morning presenters. And they never ask you a single question that you talked to the researcher about. And one example was in the Good Morning. He said, "How many books have you written?" That was his first question. And I said, "I don't know how many books." And then another time, this is the memoir. That was a beaut, the memoir. There's, I think, a few seconds in my memoir, maybe quarter of a page, where I talk about Freddie Mercury ringing my doorbell. And I didn't know who Freddie Mercury was. I mean, it's not that, the latter part of the Queen, which was most people would have known. I didn't recognize this very odd little man with buck teeth and a moustache. And he said, "I used to know the previous owner. Do you still have an organ?" And he had these teeth. So I said, "Yes, I do actually have an organ." And he said, "Well, can I come in? I really want to play it." And I said, "No, you can't." Shut the door. Now, that is a minuscule little bit in my memoir. What happens? They don't want to know about my memoir because they've never read it on these breakfast shows or the novels. They suddenly said, "So tell us all about Freddie Mercury." And I said, "Well, there's nothing really. Can I play your organ?" You go, "No." That's what promotion you have to go through. But you need to do it because there's an awful lot of terrific crime books out there. What's going to make somebody go, "Oh, I saw Lynda she was quite funny. I'll have that book. I'll buy it." That's why you do promotions. And that's why I'm totally behind my publishers for organizing it. Even though I hate it. You gotta do it. You gotta do it.
So going back to Jessica, because that's why we're here, isn't it?
Yeah.
To promote her. You have talked about her as a forensic scientist, but she's more than that, isn't she? She's not just
Yes.
like your average forensic, like good forensic scientist. She's got a little bit more to her.
She's a psychologist and a profiler. So she has, the kind of roof over everything, but she doesn't specialize. My favorite moment in the book where you find something about her is that Jessica was a probation officer and she was sexually assaulted by a young guy. And she was made afraid, in fact, terrified. And she's never forgotten it. No. And then during the process in the book, she's confronted by him, but not to accuse him, not to actually face somebody that had been a torment in her life. She's been brought in and she thinks he is innocent. So you see her draw from this revolting man who frightened the life out of her, tormented her, And she does it. She draws and draws the truth out of him bit by bit. And the sequence when she's talking to him, encouraging him to talk, to talk, to talk. And eventually he can hardly believe she's being so incredible to him. And he automatically reaches out to touch her. And it's just one line and it comes bang. And she says, "Don't touch me." So you then realize that she has got so many qualities, and that ferocious calmness when she says, "Don't touch me," you realize that was an act. That was her working. And I love that. So you've got to imagine, I'm writing. And, I become Jessica. I'm doing the line over and over again. How much of the line do I need in? Do I want it in? And, things like that are a joy for me to do. I just love it. And also, I'm very, very aware of what abuse does to people and how they control it and how they have to live with it. You can, not 100% of people have ever known fear. And predatory fear, where it builds, that is something that is very hard to actually move away. Sometimes the sound of fear will come back to you and you can't stop it. Like there's a sound. And that, again, I had to research and listen to what a victim told me, who said that this one sound, this young girl who was now a middle-aged woman, there was one sound that consistently terrified her, and it was the movement of wooden curtain rings, because that, what she heard, was her curtain being moved aside by the rapist. And you think that's a sound, but actually, if you then play it again in your mind, she said, if she ever heard it anywhere, the sound of a curtain being moved. And so those are the moments that for me are like fodder. I eat them up and eat them up.
One of my favourite moments in the book is her interview.
Yeah.
I think that was marvellous, like the bit where she goes into interview to be on the team.
Yeah. And she's also prepared for the interview. Man, is she prepared. And I mean, it's not written in, but I know she would have been practicing in front of the mirror how she's going to answer. And it is very interesting to me because of the discrimination that is still lurking within the Metropolitan Police is nowhere near as it was with Prime Suspect. It has come on in leaps and bounds. But you have an inferior or a man who feels himself inferior to her intellect. And she could so easily have been put down, but she won't go. She literally fires back at him. And I love that, that. And again, it's showing her levels. She has so many levels inside that complex woman. She's a very complex woman, which is why, sometimes I find it really disrespectful to the policewomen that I work with. When you're watching a detective show and they've got a 22-year-old flinging themselves around, I'm so tired of seeing so many females whipping around a corner with the gun. It doesn't work that way. You need training, you need time, and you need to have seniority. You don't get there at age 20. It doesn't work that way. And I find it very disrespectful to so many of the policewomen that I know and have worked with that have been through it. And sometimes the same policewoman that I'm working with will throw in an anecdote that is so wonderful, about one wonderful lady said, oh, when she was on patrol, a foot officer, under a cape, they used to have their fish and chips. Nobody knew they were having their dinner on the patrol. And it was lovely little things like that. And I go to lots of, the Met police, ex-police women, retired police women's functions. And one, I think she was 80. And she came, she said, can I sit with you, darling? So I said, yes, of course. So she said, I got the craze. I said, did you? She said, yeah. Had them in the back of my van. And these wonderful women. Respect. I'm always going on about, if you go and get a story from someone or an anecdote, respect it. Because you can't pay. Sometimes with some of the prisoners, I did a little backhander via a washing machine or something like that to their families. You can't pay. That's not on.
Yes, I mean, her team as well sort of make her stronger, don't they? She's got like 2 amazing people that she's working with.
Yeah.
In the book that really help out.
And they also sometimes her team, behind her back will pull a face. Watch her, she's got eyes at the back of her head because, they respect her. But sometimes when they get a slap over the wrist, they don't like it. And that's normal. That's the way life is, really.
You've got some more comments on our stream. Steve, one of our American members, said he met you at Capital Crime last year and you were one of the most fascinating speakers he's ever had the pleasure of listening to.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Alex has asked, he says, world of forensics, and you're quite sort of well respected in the world of forensics, aren't you? You're a member of the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Great honor.
It says the world of forensics must have changed drastically while you've been writing. What have you learned that you've been able to incorporate into your new novel with Jessica?
I think basically the blood pooling, that has advanced a lot, but in every way, fingerprints. Also, I think, right now we are solving brutal murders 30 years ago. And the ability of DNA, I mean, it's hard to believe that in Prime Suspect, it was the first time DNA had ever been mentioned. Nobody had ever used DNA before or heard of it. Now it's flippantly strung around on everything. But the reality is that right now they can find a piece of clothing from a rape or murder that occurred 20, 30 years ago, and up comes the DNA. Added to that, which is now, I think, very, very relevant, is familial DNA, where they can go and find a killer via links to a family member. The only thing one will always need is blood. And it's amazing how the Gold Gate, the big serial killer for loose for something like 30, 40 years. It was the Golden Gate killer, serial killer. I mean, a terrifying killer. Never, ever stopped the search. And it was a distant relative of his who was booked on some misdemeanor, gave a blood sample, and suddenly they go, hang on, there's the link, look. And that's how they traced him all the way to the killer. And that to me is almost like magic. That, and again, my respect for the police is 100%. You have detectives that never give up, never walk away, will always remember. And sometimes, when retired detectives are being interviewed, listen to the way they talk, what memories they have, and what case marks them for horror. And when I was, doing a lot of production, in one case, it was digging up a body, and it was very decomposed. And I needed absolutely to know how they got it up, what did they do with it, how did they work it, and very fortunately, somebody said, "Well, this detective was on the Fred and Rosemary West case, and he's worth talking to." So I said, "Oh, thank you very much." So he was exceedingly helpful, and he said, "There's one thing, if I come and talk to you, I do not wish to discuss the Rose and Fred West case." I said, "Look, all I need to know is your expertise in uncovering the body." He talked for 2.5 hours. It just came out, everything, how the bodies were found. It was there in that event in his life is there, never goes away. And that part of me is why I'm so careful when I'm researching and uncovering, things like familial DNA. It means nobody's going to get away with it anymore. They won't.
It is, but I think, I mean, as a scientist, I like to read books and know that the science is going to be correct, especially when it comes to DNA. But one of the things I sensed in, like, especially in the scene of the crime, is that you'd really done that research. That science was not to the point of being boring to the people reading it, but it was very accurate. Like you know exactly what you're talking about when you're writing those moments.
Because again, it's that word respect. If I've spent a lot of time, and I'm very fortunate because literally tied to my left hand is a man called Cass Sutherland, and he was a high-ranking detective within the Met who then went on to CSI, and he's brilliant. He was, if I say to him, "Could you get me this and this and this?" He goes, "Oh, well, hang on, I'll find it." And he will find a detective that's either worked on the case. It's like the diamonds in the book, the new novel, the diamonds. And he said, "Well, I think I've got the guy." He comes in, he shows me the machine they're making the diamonds, and he's incredible. He's the most wonderfully calm, quiet man, who I don't think I could have done anywhere near the work I've done without him. And his wife was also a policewoman and a great help. And he's just, to have somebody so trustworthy who's capable of finding everything that I want, because it's quite difficult when you're saying, "Have you found anybody that's lifted a head off something and put it on the wrong place?" You say, "I'll have a look." And he'll come up with the info. He's remarkable. It's Cass Sutherland. Great man.
The diamond thing is amazing. Like because they have a machine, don't they, that makes like lab grown.
They're very common now. And also, what's weird is that my ex-mother-in-law had an exquisite diamond and black pearl ring. And it was loose on her finger because she'd either lost weight, I can't remember. And so she went to have it resized. And the jeweler called her and said, "It's not a real black pearl." And she said, "Oh, yes, it is. It's from Russia. I've got the insurance money. I've got the provenance. I've got the provenance." He said, "No, there's a fake." At some point, she tried to remember, but it was cleaned. The pearl had been switched. And that is quite common. Quite common. You know, getting a diamond. Not that I've got any diamonds worth polishing, but be wary if you have.
Laura says you're often people shut up and take my money, author. Who are yours?
Sorry, what was it?
Laura says you're often people shut up and take my money, author. I describe those as the people who it doesn't matter what they've written, you're just going to buy the book because it's got their name on it. Who are yours?
I rather like Karen Slaughter, her work. She's very strong. Need a good stomach to read Karen Slaughter. I love Val McDermott. Love her. And I think her last work is she's just getting better and better and better. And I don't mean that in any sycophantic way. I think she's a very strong writer. We have a lot of very good female crime writers. And I do nip along the bookshelves, whip them off. I'm quite well known to lift my own books and put them in number one slot.
Do you think that like some of your sort of moves through that sort of crime world has helped that sort of flood of really good female crime writers though? Do you think you've been an inspiration to those like women that are coming through now and being such strong crime authors?
Yeah, I think if you're going to write crime, do your research. Have a look at the top level and see how good they are. I mean, to me, you should always read Raymond Chandler. Takes my breath away. He is a genius. Brilliant comedy lines, brilliant, fast description of characters. He's strong writer to read. And a few years ago, I was in New York and I was promoting a book called Cold Shoulder, Oh Man, in New York. And Harry Evans, who is a very esteemed editor at Random House, said, oh, would you read some of your new book? We've got a kind of session going because we're reproducing all of Raymond Chandler's short stories. And so this is really big promotion for Raymond Chandler. And we have two other writers there and they will be talking about their book. So I immediately thought, I'll better read everything Raymond Chandler has ever read. And I read everything, one after the other. I was on the beach. It was summertime. I was laughing. I was reading. I thought, my God, this man is a genius. And I kept scribbling lines down that made me roar with laughter. And at the same time, his pace is very strong. So when we got to do the event in New York, none of the other writers mentioned him. And I thought, oh, I was getting very hot and bothered because we were on a square and I was on the last edge of the square. And I thought, oh, thank God I've read everything because they're all obviously depending on me to talk about Raymond Chandler. So when eventually it got to me, I stood up and I said, I must read some lines of Raymond Chandler. The audience were howling with laughter. And so I went really off, doing the lines. And eventually Harry Evans came onto the platform and said, ladies and gentlemen, Lynda has used up all the time and not promoted her own book. So this is the book. I then, when I got back home, had this huge bottle of champagne because Random House had never known sales like it. But what everybody wanted to know was where did the lines from Lynda La Plante, where did she get them from? Which story? And he said, we're inundated. Can you now send us which book you got the lines from? That's how good Raymond Chandler is. And then you can move into much darker ones. that the Black Dahlia is a real read. Real Black Dahlia.
I think you mentioned that in there's one thing as a something I've read of yours. You mentioned that as a sort of a case that you found quite influential.
Yeah, terrifying case. Because it was never resolved. And there have been various books about the case, about the victim, who was called Elizabeth Short. And I actually wrote a TV episode in Trial and Retribution called The Red Dahlia. It was a copycat. Outrageous.
What have you this is a question I ask everybody on the author chats. What have you read recently and really enjoyed?
What have I read? Well, I can, I am a historical, but I love lengthy read, is James Elroy, My Dark Places. It's an astonishing book, which I reread recently. But on the whole, I read historical, the Romanovs. And sometimes I pick up a book and I can't believe that nobody hasn't made it into a movie. And The Lost King of France is an extraordinary novel, based on factual, a scientist collecting evidence to identify if it was the Dauphin that died in the prison after, the revolution. And it's an extraordinary book. It's so, because it crosses two worlds. It crosses, the French Revolution and scientific forensic work to identify the remains. And it is so extraordinary because when the child, Marie Antoinette's son, was found, he was starved and had been starved, and he was about 12 by then. And he was starved to death and beaten, and horrific. And he was deaf and dumb. So they said this could not be the Dauphin. So at the autopsy, the surgeon, for some reason, took the heart and kept it. And that heart was used forensically, excuse me, matched with hairs from Marie Antoinette's family, woven into a bracelet. And he was able to prove that tragic child was the Dauphin. And I've got this book and I'm going, oh my God, this is so good. Oh gosh, I'd love to write the film script. I want to. You try selling it. As soon as you start to say anything historical, no, we don't want to do that. No.
It's a shame. I love historical stuff, so I would be really interested in that.
Yeah. Napoleon. The best film I've ever seen in my life was Abel Gance's Napoleon, made in 1923. It is the most astonishing footage. It blows your head off. 1923, before talkies. And it's nearly 6 hours long.
Wow.
Can't take your eyes off it. It's superb. Superb film. I tell everybody, take a look at the mastery of this director, writer, actor. Oh, anyway, I digress slightly.
Well, we've got 2 minutes left. It's been a pleasure. But do you want to remind people what they're going to go away and buy?
You're going to shoot out to buy my latest. I just hope you really want to And I just happen to have a copy here. And it is the scene of the crime. And there's Jessica in the background. And I do hope you enjoy it. Whether enjoy is the right word, or find it interesting and riveting. And this makes you want to go and buy every other book of mine, which are equally as good, in my humble estimation.
I'm hoping that there's going to be a second one in that series.
I think so. I think so. A really complicated one. What I'd love to do is maybe do something historical. That might be interesting.
Yeah, that would be superb.
Maybe I'll nick that scientist with the heart. Can you imagine that heart that was taken all those years ago, dried up? The aorta was this big, and he was able to slice a little bit of that and match it to hairs. This is what science, why it's so exciting. Really, really exciting. And you have to also, at the same time, not get too buried in it. The people, what on earth is she going on about? He said, you've got to get your plot good as well.
You do, and I think you managed it really well in that book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've loved talking. As you can tell, I do talk a lot.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and so many of our members have really enjoyed it. There's lots of thank yous. People are going away to look up the book, and people have really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. I'm so pleased. Thank you all. Great pleasure. I've enjoyed myself.
Wonderful.
So we're off.